everyone. Welcome to A Girl in Love with Tech podcast. My name is Rachel Rabo. I'm a Microsoft MVP, a Power Platform, and a Dynamics 365 CRM developer. And our special guest for today is Jeff. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks so much for having me on your podcast. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to interview you. Yeah. And today we're going to be discussing about the future, past, and present of Microsoft SharePoint. And our special guest. So, hi, Jeff, if you can introduce yourself so we can know more about you.
Sure. Jeff Teper. I'm the president of our collaborative apps and platforms group for Microsoft 365. I've been at Microsoft, it'll be next week, actually, 33 years.
Wow, that's
Um,
amazing.
yeah. And in the late 90s, I started working on a project that was codenamed Tahoe, that in 2001 we released is SharePoint.
Yeah.
Actually, next week it'll be the 24th anniversary of the first wave of SharePoint.
Wow.
So next year will be 25.
Yeah.
And, been working on SharePoint for the most part since, bringing it to the cloud, doing AI. I also lead the Teams organization and Engage, Viva Engage. A
Yeah.
project management tool. So really, my team works on communication and collaboration tools. And uh, probably the biggest arc of my career was the shift to the cloud, and now the shift to
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm very curious, how did you get the name as father of SharePoint?
Yeah, there was, like a lot of
Yeah.
Microsoft products, there was multiple different incubations.
Okay.
So I had, I, uh, boy, if you want to go really far back, I'll
Mhm.
do it quickly.
Yeah.
I
Sure.
worked in the initial version of the internet flavor of MSN in
Okay.
1995.
Yeah.
And I worked on the servers, and we started getting customers who wanted to buy the servers we were using to run MSN. And we
Okay.
sold them to some companies, and we turned it into a product called Site Server. And
Yeah.
Site Server failed. It wasn't a business success. So
Okay.
we shut it down and started over. And I thought, well, what could I do differently?
Okay.
And I thought, let's try to focus on intranet collaboration. Sort
Yeah.
of office and the web are coming together. And so we
Yes.
started a group called Publishing and Knowledge Management, and with a
Okay.
project called Tahoe.
Yeah.
And Tahoe was the first thing that, in our marketing team, we were going to call it SharePoint. But then there were some other projects, Front Page, which you may
Okay.
remember, Office Service Extensions, Web Parts, Team Pages. And so we sort
Yeah.
of brought them all together and called them SharePoint. And so I was, technically I was the father of part of SharePoint, half of
Yeah.
SharePoint.
Yeah.
But I've run the team for the last, much of the last 20 years. So it's,
Yeah. That's amazing. It's really, really amazing. Like you were at the beginning of SharePoint. It's really amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's, one thing that just blows my mind is, so SharePoint now runs on dozens of data centers around the world,
Yeah.
7 million requests per second, hundreds of millions of
Wow.
users,
Yes.
trillions of files, billions of sites. I think about that scale. It's a cloud service. When we started, all of SharePoint could run on my machine, and we would release the build of SharePoint, the internal build, in the morning, and right about before I went down to lunch, I would start the install process of the
Okay.
daily build. And when I came back from lunch, it was running on my machine. And that's how I played with that day's SharePoint. And
Yes.
it sort of blows my mind that this thing that started out as being able to run on a single computer now
Yeah.
runs on millions of computers.
Yeah. It's mind blowing and amazing. Yes.
Yes.
And did you ever think that Microsoft SharePoint would be as influential as it is today? Like, did you
Yeah,
ever think of it? Yeah.
somebody, I was confident. I don't think we knew that there was going to be a lot of challenges, but
Okay.
to me, it was two things were very, very
Yes.
obvious. One was the Office tools needed a server. Word, Excel, PowerPoint needed a place to
Yes.
go save documents and collaborate. And the
Yes.
second is, if you look at the late 90s when we started this, people needed a out-of-box intranet solution
Yeah.
that users weren't going to go fire up an HTML editing tool
Yeah.
and write low-level HTML or even dot. It was that was before .NET. It was just ASP active server pages. And there were things like CGI scripts and so forth from Java server pages and a few other things. And so to me, it was so obvious that Office needed a server and the intranet was coming that I felt
Yeah.
like if we built a good product that was easy to use, uh,
Yes.
it would be a huge success. What I didn't anticipate is the level of community and fans around it,
Yeah.
which I love
Yeah.
so
Sure.
much. Uh,
Yes.
that because SharePoint's a maker product, that MVP, think about all the MVPs. The
Yeah.
MVPs really were attracted to SharePoint even before they became MVPs, if you will,
Yes.
because they
Yes.
liked building things for other people. And that phenomena that really took off in the mid 2000s, I couldn't have predicted that. I wouldn't have predicted that, the SharePoint conference would have 12,000 people and, you know,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, and we'd have hundreds of SharePoint Saturdays, now M365 events around the
Yeah.
world. So that part I didn't predict, but I definitely knew Office was going to have a server that was going to embrace the intranet.
Yeah.
Uh, I didn't, I can't say I was the first person that figured out that the cloud was going to happen, but once it became clear it was going to, we jumped on
Okay.
board on that. I
Yes.
remember in 2014, the biggest surprise was we had the cloud version of SharePoint out for a while.
Okay.
Bill Gates announced it in 2008 at the SharePoint conference, but still by 2014, even our MVPs said, "Oh, nobody's going to the cloud. These big enterprises, they're going to stay on-prem." And
Yeah.
that was probably the most challenging period for us. The beginning was really challenging because it's always hard to do
Yes.
something new. We did it and it
Yeah.
started to take off and we had a good 10 years. And then the cloud came along and a bunch of our customers said the cloud's not going to happen. And we were sure it was. So that was really the
Yeah.
second V1 of SharePoint, is just getting over that cloud hump, if you
Yes.
will.
Yeah. And I have the next question. I think you've already answered it, but I have the next question. Like, what do you think was the turning point for Microsoft SharePoint?
Yeah, I think the version 1 was a promising product, but
Yeah.
version 2 was really a breakthrough. We rewrote the thing in version 2 on ASP.NET and SQL Server so it could be faster and more scalable.
Yes.
So that, in some ways, that was probably the most important release of SharePoint, the second version,
Yeah.
because that's really what took it from people seeing its potential to being very successful.
Yes.
Then, I think the second big moment for us was um, the release of SharePoint in Office 365, June
Okay.
2011.
Yeah.
The, not everybody knows these numbers, but the way at least in the US, we do the dates, month, day, year, SharePoint
Okay.
shipped uh, on time. It was a very well part of the Office team, very well run. So we shipped from March 2nd, 2001, 3, 2, 1, basically every 2.5 years to October 11th, 2012, 10,
Okay.
11, 12. So it's almost poetic that we went from 3, 2, 1 to 10,
Yes.
11, 12 in this server era, shipping every 2 years.
Yeah.
But that was about the point we shifted to the cloud with Office 365. And we
Yeah.
then had to shift, and I mean this, every day. Not everything lights up for every customer every day,
Yeah.
but that was a huge change for us. And some of our customers, I'm sure you know these stories, that were updating Exchange and SharePoint on-prem every other release. So their users would
Okay.
get new features once every 5 years or longer. And now they
Okay.
were getting them every 5 weeks, 4 weeks, basically. And
Yeah.
that was very stressful for IT, and we'd say,
Yes.
"Hey, you don't have to upgrade or patch the servers anymore. They just get better
Yeah.
every month. The product gets better." But that was a very stressful period to go through, and so that was the
Yeah.
second big moment. Uh, I would say that the next two for us were uh, we had spent so much effort getting to the cloud that we didn't do a lot on the UI of SharePoint for a few years. And
Okay.
so in 2016, we released a big new set of UI and platform changes.
Yeah.
We call that event the Future of SharePoint, May 4th,
Yes.
2016. May 4th, may the 4th be with you, Star Wars days. As you can tell, we
That's
love
really creative. Yeah.
playing with dates. And that was really when we took a big leap in the UI as well as the platform, both for developers with the SharePoint framework and power users with what you work on, which is the
Yeah.
Power Platform.
Yes.
We announced Flow and Power App. Flow, of
Yes.
course, is now Power Automate.
Yeah.
Power Apps integrated with SharePoint. And that was a big change because we had our own workflow engine, our own
Yeah.
design tool, and we really bet before it was anything on the Power Platform.
Yeah.
Uh, and Charles Lamanna, who I know you know,
Yes.
Charles,
I do.
Charles would say, SharePoint incubated the Power Platform, and we're really, really glad to have done that. So that was 2016. And then the last moment, I would say, you know, uh, uh, when we released Copilot
Yes.
and
Yeah.
we brought AI to Copilot used SharePoint for AI, and we brought AI to SharePoint. So there's been some great moments from the V1 startup to the uh, transition to the
Business.
cloud to the new programming model and UX to the AI era. Those would be the 4 or 5 chapters.
Yeah, that's amazing. And there's something I'm so curious about, like, what was the thought process that that just sparked that idea that we should integrate SharePoint deeply into Office 365, Microsoft 365, and Teams? Like, what was the thought process? What
Yeah,
brought about that idea?
yeah. It was actually easy. We liked it because,
Okay.
well, first, let's go back to Office.
Yeah.
Long, long time ago, you bought and you bought independent applications. Lotus 123, Microsoft Word, uh, um, Word Perfect, etc. And when the graphical user interface came out on Windows and the Mac, we did a suite of graphical applications, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, in one
Okay.
product at a low price with a consistent
Yeah.
user experience. So we really had established that a suite was a good thing for customers and a good thing for our business, that, just
Okay.
buy the essential tools and give it to everybody. And we always wanted to do that on the server because we had uh, Exchange for email, SharePoint
Yeah.
for collaboration. And you might
Yes.
remember, some people remember, we changed its name a few times. We had Office Communication Services, and then it was Link, and then it was Skype for Business, and it's now Teams. We're not going to change its name again. Changing its name 4 times was enough.
Yeah.
Um, and and we did a product for those called Back Office, if people
Okay.
remember, where you could get Exchange and SharePoint and some of our systems management stuff and other stuff. But because these things were so complicated for IT to deploy on the server, most IT organizations didn't deploy them all together. And
Yeah.
so therefore, we couldn't really count on every customer to have the latest version of SharePoint and Exchange and
Okay.
and Link. And so when it came time to do the cloud, we said, "Oh, this is great. We can just do what we always wanted to do with back office,
Yeah.
a
Yes.
server box, and just do it in the cloud for customers and sell them Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Exchange, SharePoint, and Link,
Yeah.
and Skype, is a single product." So it was that one wasn't such a big leap because we had been kind of doing it with back office for many years. In fact, what most people bought, the product most people bought was not SharePoint or Exchange. They bought the back office client access license that got them the rights to our servers. It was only when the cloud came along that they actually used them as a consistent product. But they were
Yes.
buying the license or well before.
Okay. Yeah, that's amazing. And there's something you mentioned that I want to ask you a question on. Like you mentioned how like SharePoint has so many people who love SharePoint, like out there who love SharePoint. So one question I have on that is that how has the community shaped the direction of Microsoft SharePoint?
Yeah, the community is incredible.
Yeah.
We, you know, and we, you know, we, it's so great to be able to talk to so many people around the world who
Yes.
use our product. And, a lot of, as you can imagine, we're a big company. So a lot of times we spend time with the biggest customers in the world, the biggest
Yes.
banks or consulting firms or governments. But what I love is making sure that we're connected. Microsoft's mission when Satya became CEO and reframed it, he said Microsoft's mission was to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve
Yeah.
more. And I love,
Yes.
he said every person and organization. He didn't just say the big ones with lots of employees and lots of money. He
Yeah.
said everyone. And so I think part of the magic for SharePoint for us is seeing people in the community who may not be the CIO of a 1,000-person IT organization,
Yes.
but they're the heroes in their companies, whether it's an organization or a consulting firm that helps others. And uh, so that really got us in the mindset in the SharePoint team of making our customers and partners heroes. And so when you all would give us feedback, we would listen.
Yeah.
It is really valuable. And and I would say 90% of the time it was easy. We'd have these community events. We would meet with the MVPs. We would get
Yeah.
feedback. We'd incorporate it. But about 10% of the time, it was really hard. Like I think about when we moved from InfoPath and our workflow engine to Power Apps and Flow, a lot of people were mad
Yeah.
at us at the time and said, yeah, hey, we had made this bet on Windows workflow in
Yeah.
SharePoint, and now you're changing it. And we said, we're sorry, we don't want to do that too often, but
Okay.
we thought we needed a common workflow platform across Microsoft, across
Yeah.
all the products that would integrate with SharePoint and Dynamics and all sorts of third-party connectors. And
Yes.
it didn't make sense to just have a workflow technology in SharePoint. And so the MVPs, the community pushed back on us. It worked out. The cloud was the biggest one. I remember, the SharePoint and Exchange conferences in the early
Yeah.
2010s. The MVPs, the community said, "Don't go to the cloud. None of our customers are going to the cloud." And we said, "Look, you trust us. We are not trying to put you out of business or anything like that.
Yeah.
But the future of computing is the cloud and you can focus less on backing up servers and more on creating solutions." And so I would say that, we built very high top trust with the community. We still every week have calls from the SharePoint team. Vesa from our team
Yeah.
posts those out on X and LinkedIn. Sometimes we have 1,000 people calling into those. So we listen to right. Actually, I don't know when you're going to go live with this. But
It's
next
live.
week, what
This
it's
is live. Yeah.
okay. Next week,
Yes.
March starts a 2-week global hackathon for SharePoint, where
Okay.
people can use the new UI, the new AI to build
Yes.
cool stuff with SharePoint and show it off. And we'll pick winners and show them off at the M365 conference. So
Yes.
we love the community. It's great. And occasionally, and I think if you try to make everybody happy all the time, you're not innovating enough. So we don't always listen. We didn't listen when the community said, don't go to the cloud. But
Yeah.
other than that, I think we've done a good job of listening.
Okay, good. And that leads me to the next question to ask you. Like, what approach with leading innovation have you been able to maintain a strong connection with the community, especially with the decision where a lot of people had their different thoughts about SharePoint moving into the cloud?
Yeah. So we have a lot of different ways to engage with customers and partners,
Yeah,
and they're all very valuable.
yeah,
For me, we have the big events like Build and Ignite, where we get to talk to customers in the community. But the
yeah,
M365 conference we do once a year, including coming up in Vegas in May, is really a M365 focused conference, and that's spiritually evolved out of the SharePoint conferences. So there's a lot of it's a chance to get together with really the SharePoint fans once a year and share our latest message, but also get feedback. But then we
yeah,
have, as you know, we have a variety of forums where we talk to the MVP very regularly on SharePoint and Microsoft 365 and Power Platform,
yeah,
including the MVP Summit. But we have a lot of other things. So when we do new things like, my favorite new thing this year is SharePoint agents, because
yeah,
anybody in seconds can go make an agent that's secure, grounded on
yeah,
SharePoint. It respects all your security and permissions. And I love that because it's like what we were trying to do 25 years ago with sites. Anybody can make an intranet.
yeah,
Anybody can do it. And now we're doing the same thing with AI. Anybody can make an AI. You don't need to figure out how to take the data out of SharePoint and stick it in a
yeah,
vector index and build an orchestration engine that calls a large language model. I mean, some people are doing that and it's fun and we love
yeah,
that, but not everybody's going to do all that stuff I just said. So
yes,
and so SharePoint agents is a great example of where, each week and month we get together with folks from the community and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do
yeah,
we need to do? And the community says, we need these features, we need this security, we need this reporting.
yeah,
So we do it at big events, but a lot of it is just these calls we do with Besa and team, with people who are just passionate to talk to us every week or two. And so, again, follow Vesa or Caruana or any of the sort of community focused people in our team, and you'll see we're talking to the community every week.
yeah. Yes, thank you. And the next question I have to ask you is that where do you see, we've talked about the past of SharePoint, the present, and now the future of SharePoint. Where do you see SharePoint in the next 5 years, especially with AI and automation?
Yeah, this is where I spend most of my time.
Yeah,
We continue to focus on the core service capabilities: performance, reliability, security, usability, accessibility, et cetera.
yeah,
But AI is really the place where we're focused on our innovation. And we've been talking. It's one of the things we always do in SharePoint is
yeah,
talk about how to talk about SharePoint,
okay,
because there's part of the problem is figuring out what you're going to build, but the other
yes,
part is how you're going to talk about it. Even in the beginning of SharePoint, we were we were debating, was it SharePoint or SharePoint Server or SharePoint Portal, and we
okay,
decided for the first version to call it SharePoint Team Services and Portal Server. And so now we're, with copilots and agents, we're definitely still working on talking about it, but I think I can share the sort of way I think about it. One way I think about it is, what is the problems that customers have where they want us to help them with SharePoint? It's
okay,
collaboration, business process,
Yeah.
employee communications, and knowledge management. It's
Yes.
those four things. Those were the same things they asked us to help them solve in 2001 when we released the product. And they're the
Yeah.
same thing today. And I think they'll be the same things in 5, 10 years. The like, hey, Microsoft, can you help my team collaborate to get projects done? Can you help us
Yeah.
streamline business processes with documents with SharePoint and Power Automate? Can you help me do employee communications with SharePoint and Engage so I can educate all my employees? And then
Yeah.
can you help me organize my information so that I've got all my sales documents, my engineering documents, and people can find them and so forth.
Yeah.
And so what we see with AI is we're going to solve those problems way better than we solved them before. That
Okay.
there'll be an AI experience in SharePoint that will help you automate a business process. And I'll give you an example of a feature that not many people uh, know about, but it's already
Okay.
started very successful. Is we have a feature called SharePoint Agreements. It's
Okay.
building on our workflow technology to help people automate contracts with AI. You
Yeah.
can imagine people sign these 200-page contracts. There's all these details. They have to compare whether the
Yes.
contract has changed and so forth. And so SharePoint is sort of the glue with AI and Word and Power Automate
Okay.
to automate those workflows around contracts. And ultimately, the AI is going to do more and more and more to help write the contracts, analyze the contracts. You like ask questions, show me all my contracts that
Yeah.
have for the most money or for the longest due date or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
Similarly, in uh, for employee communications, oh my gosh, I love this. In January, we had SharePoint for the AI era, where we
Yeah.
introduced the flexible layouts of SharePoint, where you can things no longer have to fit to a grid. You can lay things out anywhere on the page,
Yeah.
and we use AI in SharePoint to help you design the page,
Yes.
uh, and you can give it content and pick a layout. Well, imagine SharePoint looking at all your documents and just organizing the whole site all the time for you and keeping it up to date. So I feel like just like going to the cloud let people focus on more valuable work than backing up their servers and patching them. AI is going to help us automate content processes, knowledge
Okay.
organization,
Yeah.
and the concept of a SharePoint agent is going to get a lot of skills. The skill it has today is basically summarization and Q&A, but the
Yeah.
SharePoint agent is going to help you do a lot of workflows and collaboration, and so um, yeah, I'd encourage people to look at the videos we launched in January, but that really is just the first step. In 5 years, I think people will be amazed at what AI and SharePoint does.
Yes.
I
And
can,
in terms,
I can imagine 2, 3 years out. 5 years is a lot, and it's hard to predict exactly where we'll be in 5 years, but I think I know where
yeah.
I'll be in 2 years.
Okay. That's awesome. Yay. And there's
Yeah.
something you mentioned that I have a question on. You mentioned SharePoint agreements. Do you think there is any security concerns on SharePoint agreements, especially for those who are just sharing it for the first time and they would like to explore it?
Yeah, I think through a lot of feedback over the last couple decades, we have the best security in the industry. So as you know,
Yeah.
we have the most secure cloud. Uh, we let IT set up and run SharePoint and SharePoint sites with the policies and permissions that make sense for them. Once a
Okay.
team, say a legal team, has a SharePoint site, say for contracts, they can decide who's got permission. They can use uh, labels with classification and policies to restrict sharing and download and a lot of other things. So
Okay.
when we built our agreements and contracting solution, it
Yeah.
was on that foundation of our cloud security, our admin controls, and our site security. So we didn't actually
Okay.
have to invent much new. And in fact, a lot of customers have have asked us to do these higher value business process content management features because they like the rich security of SharePoint. If you just take
Yeah.
one thing, uh, classification, labeling, and protection, where you can set up your own labels in your organization, say these are top secret contracts. You
Okay.
can label the documents in the document library with that, and you can say, the following things happen with top secret contracts. We get all that for free, and that's something that is supported in the Office clients and the SharePoint UI. So that's why we've seen very very high interest in this, because a lot of the previous generation of contract management solutions, document management solutions, didn't have the level of security controls we have in SharePoint and in Purview.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. That's amazing. Thank you very much for the breakdown and the explanation. It's really amazing. Yeah. And the next question I have is for organizations who are interested in leveraging AI within SharePoint, what advice do you have for them, or what best practices do you think they should take?
Yeah, I think there's first, governing the content's important, but you don't want to, in the AI era, study governance for 3 years and not learn anything. I think it's very important for every organization to get down the learning curve on AI. In fact, one
Okay.
guy, I was in a roundtable of CIOs at Ignite last fall, and I was asking them about their different approaches on AI, and some
Yeah.
were more cautious and going slow. And one of the CIOs said, "Look, now's the time for us to learn as an organization. If we don't learn about how we can use AI to be better as a company, we're going to get lapped. We won't be able to catch up in 3 years."
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
So the first thing I'd say is have a governance approach, but don't take 3 years.
Yeah.
We have many tools with the policies, with SharePoint Advanced Management, with restricted search for you to say, hey, I'm going to start with this set of content and not that set of content. So figure
Okay.
out a way to get comfortable and get started.
Yeah.
The second is try it out, and try it out every day. Try out
Yes.
every day. Every day, Copilot's getting better.
Yes.
Integrating the
Yes.
latest models, improving the relevance, new features. SharePoint agents,
Yeah.
every day getting better. Literally every single day, I get an update for the team about new things to make it more relevant, more useful, make the models work better.
Yeah.
And the thing I would say, sometimes people stare at the AI like Copilot, and they're almost afraid to ask it a hard question. It's funny. Yeah, I told this story a few minutes ago about there's two parts to SharePoint. One is
Okay.
figuring out what to build, and then the
Yeah.
second is figuring out how to talk about it. So
Okay.
we have our plan for, we're actually building a lot of stuff for SharePoint in the next 3 to 6 months. I know
Yeah.
exactly what we're building for the most part, but we're thinking about how to talk about it. And so I asked Copilot and said, I gave it the document for our plans in our words. And I said, hey, Copilot, you know, we got to explain this future of AI and agents in SharePoint very clear, and teams,
Okay.
very clearly to customers.
Yeah.
They're confused about all the pace of AI innovation and so forth. Can you analyze our different customers, analyze how our competitors are talking about AI, and
Okay.
recommend the positioning and supporting bullets for how
Yeah.
we talk about AI in SharePoint and Teams? So a
Okay.
very open-ended question that I ask a senior person, and I said, give me as much detail as possible. And it
Okay.
wrote a 2 or 3 page document for me in Word that was extremely helpful. I'm not going to use 100% of it, but 80% of it was right. So going
Yeah.
back to your question, I would say to people, try it out. Try
Yes.
out Copilot with your SharePoint content. Try out
Yeah.
SharePoint agents. If it's something a little more complicated, try out Copilot Studio, uh,
Yeah.
and challenge it. And but also realize it's going to get better every single week, every single month. So
Yeah.
keep trying. There are things that Copilot couldn't do very well a year ago that it does
Yes.
amazing. I'll give you an
Yeah.
example.
Better. It's getting better every day. Yeah. That's very, very true.
You know, if you think about generating a PowerPoint deck, when Copilot first released, it did that. It would make a PowerPoint deck, and it was okay. But now it's so much better because we've improved the software and the models and the
Yeah.
experience, and it can use your own branding and so forth. So anyway, I would say to people, try it out, try it out, try it out.
Yeah. Okay. We have a question from Joanne. She's asking, following up on the AI governance question, how would you say SharePoint Advanced Management stands out compared to Microsoft Purview? Or is it best to use both to get the best experience?
It is best to use both. Purview, of course,
Yeah.
lets you set labels and policies on content.
Okay.
SharePoint Advanced Management analyzes your content and can help you make the decisions to which policies to use.
Yeah.
So Advanced Management does more analysis and insights, whereas Purview is applying the controls. So they really go better together.
Yeah.
We got some feedback that when we first released SharePoint Advanced Management and then we started selling Copilot, people felt,
Okay.
hey, for me to buy SAM and Copilot and Purview feels like
Okay.
a bit much. So SharePoint Advanced Management is now included in Copilot. So if you buy Copilot, you just get SharePoint Advanced Management. You still can buy it separately if you want, but if you're
Okay.
going AI, you don't have to buy SharePoint Advanced Management. It's just included in Copilot.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. And thank you, Joanne, for the question.
Yeah.
And I have my last question. I know you have given a lot of examples of how AI is being used in SharePoint, but if you can give us one last example of how AI is being used within SharePoint for organizations who are listening or people who are listening and they are interested with co-pilots and AI in SharePoint.
Yeah. I'll give you an example from inside Microsoft. There's a lot that are similar outside, but a lot of people want to know, hey, do you use this? So I mentioned
Yeah.
our legal group. Uh, we
Yes.
have, we're a big company. We have a lot of contracts with customers and partners. We have
Okay.
NDA agreements. In fact, every MVP in our community signs an
Yeah.
NDA agreement, as you
Yeah.
probably know. Uh, when we do partnerships with channel partners or build data centers, or work with government bodies around the world in different countries. There's an ever-changing set of contracts and regulations,
Yeah.
employment, uh, digital safety, AI, on and on and on we have to follow. And so our legal team can be overwhelmed with questions. And so what
Okay.
they did
Yeah.
is they built a repository. They have a SharePoint site where
Yeah.
they have all this stuff, but people still are too quick to email them, and they're very friendly people, and they'll answer. But
Yeah.
it's hard, and they don't want to answer the same question over and over again. So they built a SharePoint agent in
Okay.
seconds on their legal repository, and it's
Yeah.
answering most of the questions for most of our employees about really important high value legal concerns, again, whether it's
Yeah.
employment or contracts or regulations. And they're incredibly happy. Our legal team
Yeah.
has spoken at our conferences, and we have a lot of customers. And so I think it's a pretty common problem if you have like a support organization or a marketing organization that's trying to work with sales. Say we have many more salespeople than we have marketing people, and if the salespeople all ask the same questions, it'd be inefficient. And so we're now using AI to answer our sales questions or support questions, and it's really helping a lot. So that's probably the easiest, quickest win is if you've got a knowledge base, put a SharePoint agent on it in seconds, start
Okay.
and let it start answering some of the questions for you.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love the use case you gave on how on how SharePoint is being used within Microsoft. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. It's amazing having Jeff here on the podcast to talk about Microsoft SharePoint. And do you have any last words for us before we end the podcast?
Just thank you. It's as I said, next week is the 24th anniversary of SharePoint and the 50th
Yeah.
year of Microsoft. Uh, I know we can be a big company, but we're incredibly grateful.
Yeah.
One person at a time decided to use SharePoint or decided to recommend it or build a solution on it or join our community or host an event.
Yes.
And there's a lot of choices in tech, a lot of good companies to get to work with. And we're very privileged and grateful that you, Rachel, the rest of the community, and even everybody watching this is taking
Yeah.
their time to care about SharePoint and care about Microsoft technologies. So thank you so much. We feel proud of what we've done over the last 24 years, but we know we could do better. And so you can count on us to be very committed to come to work every day, not taking your support of us for granted, and just
Yeah.
working harder to do better for you all. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's amazing. Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Rachel. All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks,
So thank you
everybody.
very much. Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.
Yeah.